Ruth Ware says, no one does suburban paranoia like Shari Lapena. I mean, that is so true, the paranoia. So you start with Avery. Was that the first character who came to your mind? And then you build her world around her.
Yeah, so I knew I wanted to have a little girl and a dad who hit her. Because I wanted that family to have that shame where the dad was hitting her occasionally when he lost his temper. And I wanted him to have his marriage be in trouble because they reacted differently to their little girl. So that's all I started with. And then when he hit her, and then he apologized and he left and he paused, like this is all in the first chapter, so I can tell you this. So he goes out to the car to leave and then he just pauses. So you don't really know if he left or not, or whether he went back into the kitchen. So we know there's a lot there. There's trouble in the marriage, there's trouble with the daughter. We know that the husband's been having an affair, and then it grows outward from there.
And so how did you then populate the rest of Stanhope, this little gorgeous little affluent neighborhood? Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I never set out to do it deliberately. I sort of see where one thing leads to another. So I knew there was going to be an older brother. Well, I didn't know this until I'd written the first chapter, but the older brother was supposed to pick her up from school and bring her home because she's not supposed to come home on her own. And then he feels really guilty that he was supposed to be taking care of her, but he feels responsible that she's gone missing.
He's 11 and she's 9.
Yeah. And then somehow I thought, well, the woman with whom he's having an affair is obviously going to be involved in some way. And I don't know, it just kind of grows. It just kind of grows for me.
I mean, it's fascinating because it's like your books are like a Jenga puzzle of secrets that if you pull the wrong one, everything just crashes. And so the book is about how everyone is trying to find out what happened to Avery, but not at the detriment of their own secret. So talk about that juggle.
Yeah. So, everyone in the neighborhood, most of them would like Avery to come back, even though nobody really likes her, but she's a 9-year-old girl. And, everyone's horrified that someone has taken this girl. But yeah, they're very worried about their own secrets. So some of them have secrets that are completely tangential to the disappearance of the girl, but are terrified that they're going to come out. So I just built this community of people who have different but quite believable, realistic secrets, I think. I think with my books, I like to stay in the realm of realistic. So their affairs and their, people worry a lot about what their kids might have done.
Sure, but I think all of and you're so right about how relatable every single character is in this novel. Any of the people in this novel could be any of us. I mean, they could be any of us. And so we're not thinking, well, that's a weird person. We're thinking, oh, I know somebody just like that, or oh, I would never tell that. How did those secrets come to you? I mean, I'm trying to imagine you writing the one with the family with the son and the family with the daughter and on, and each one is fascinating. Talk a little bit about how the world blossoms.
I can't really describe it except that I'm in a scene.
Okay, next question.
And then because I don't plan at all, so I just carry on. So for instance, I'll go through chapter 2. So the boy comes home and everything gets complicated. Like he's the one that told the sister that there's a key under the mat. So he feels guilty that she went home. And then the police come and I don't want to give too much away.
No, I know, and that's what I'm about to stop you. But I think the thing that's so genius about your book, and this book is spectacularly good, is that the key question of where is Avery and all the possible things that could have happened to her, and you can all think of them right now, what you think might have happened, and how everyone has a reason they want her to be found pretty much, but everyone has a reason for not wanting people to ask them certain questions. And then you bring in the police. So talk a little bit about your wonderful police investigators.
Well, police aren't my forte. I don't know a lot about police procedure. So you'll notice in my books, there's not a lot of formal police procedure. I live in Canada, and my books are set in the United States, so I do research and fact checking and make sure that it's, believable and factually correct, the way things are done. but I don't go deep into the procedure of it. My focus more is on the families involved in the crime and watching the crime and being affected by it. And I'm interested in the detectives as well, and their lives and how they feel about what they're investigating. But I don't focus on them so much.
Well,
I mean, they're the ones that put the pressure on all the characters.
Because they're just curious. They're just curious, and they're just asking, and they need to find out what happened to Avery, and it's their job to find this. And so they're going to persevere. And by their perseverance, you just ratchet up the suspense, because we want to know what the secrets are as well. And sometimes we do know them, and that's fabulous too.
Yeah, I love to use detectives to ratchet up the tension and the pressure on everybody in the family. And I always use the police to sort of, they find out things that other people in the family then find out. And then it just gets worse and worse, the things that they're finding out. They'll interview one person and find out one thing, they'll find out something from someone else. In this one, there's a great scene with the police talking to the little boy, Michael, the brother. And he's put in an impossible situation, because he's told to tell the truth, but he wants to protect his family. So the stress on him, I feel so sorry for Michael. This whole book, he just suffers.
But again, that's realistic, and that's what would happen. It's fascinating in this book, the power of guilt on each of us, and each of your characters eats away at them. Is it fun to see that happen? What goes in your mind as you're? Do you put yourself in the mind of the characters to figure out how they would feel?
Yeah, exactly. I write in a multiple third-person point of view, so I go right into the heads of most of my characters, and I just live inside their heads. I think it's probably like method acting in a way. I just get inside their heads, and I imagine what they would do and feel and how they would react. And I do enjoy it. I don't know why I enjoy it. Like, I'm detached enough that I'm going, none of this is real. But I do enjoy making things worse and worse for them. Which is so funny, because when I started writing, like, I'm a conflict avoider in my life. And, I hate conflict. I avoid it all the time. And when I first started writing, I wrote literary fiction. I wrote three novels before I started writing thrillers. And I remember my very first editor said, you really avoid conflict. Every time there's a chance for conflict in your novel, you pull back. And I went, yeah, I'm like that. That's why I don't like conflict. She goes, well, you can't do that. You have to go after the conflict to make it worse and worse. And so I took that to heart. And
yes, you did.
Yeah, and now I'm still a conflict avoider in my life, but in my fiction, I totally go for it.
Well, I love thinking of you as method acting these people. I mean, do you change your posture? Do you change how you feel, or is it just in your head?
No, it's just in my head. I don't put on any disguises or anything. I'm just sitting there like this.
But I just mean sometimes I'll be writing and I'll say she flipped her hair, and then I do that. You don't do that. No. Or I wonder.
But maybe I should.
How does skepticism look? And you make your face like. And she's looking at me like.
No, but fair. But my husband says, you talk to yourself when you're writing, and I did not know that. I did not realize that. But I guess I do kind of talk or mumble
like
the dialogue or whatever.
So your husband listens to you talk as you...
Well, I don't think he lurks and listens, because if he did, he'd probably freak out completely, but...
Because she has a knife, right?
Yeah, he'll be on another floor and...
But what does he say you said? Are you saying, ha-ha, or are you saying, oh, that's a good idea? Or I never saw that coming.
Yeah, I'm going to ask him. I don't know. He just says, you talk to yourself, or you talk out loud sometimes when you're writing. I should ask him what I'm saying.
I would love that. Confessions of Shari's husband. Your deepest, darkest secrets.
We have this idea. We do all these tours and everything, and there's a lot of husbands that go around. In fact, your husband's here. And we thought it would be really fun to have, we call them the Long-Suffering Husbands Club. And we thought there should be a panel of the husbands of, all these domestic suspense writers, like, Lisa Jewell's husband, and, Ruth Ware's husband, and Claire McIntosh's husband. And my husband says, I don't know if I'd like doing that. I said, oh, it'd be great. It'd be so funny. All the things you could tell.
would be how they drive, how they carry out food, how we're always in another world. I'll be sitting at dinner sometimes.
How you flip your hair when you're
I'm
writing
never
your
gonna
novel.
live this down. Never gonna live this down. I mean, I'll be sitting at dinner and Jonathan will say, "You're in the book, aren't you?" Because I'll just be. Do you have that? Do you get distracted by your world?
That, it's funny, I hate to say this, but my mind is blank most of the time. Like, it really is. But I'm like a Pavlovian dog. I sit in front of my computer, and then I'm on, and I just write. And then when I step away, I don't generally think about it unless I'm in the shower. I have really good ideas in the shower.
What do you write them on a waterproof thing?
No, but like I'll find I've forgotten to condition my hair, or I'll think, did I condition my hair? Because I'll be in a trance, like I won't really, and then my office is fairly close, and sometimes I will get up at night when I'm not sleeping, and I'll go write down some idea that I've had, but that's pretty rare. Mostly I think about it when I'm in front of the computer and I'm in the zone, and most of the time I don't.
I mean, that's kind of brilliant focus. I mean, that shows that when you're intending to write, your brain is with you on that. I mean, that's a propulsive thing too, that you're so focused.
I think it's years and years of discipline of being in front of the computer, and I have a quota and I have to work, and I don't wait for inspiration. And I started writing when my kids were babies, so I always had like a 2-hour, snatch of time during the naps, and I've always been really focused on that time. So I'm very focused.
So you learn to be disciplined. I want to go back to that moment that you started writing thrillers, and then we'll go back to Everyone Here Is Lying, because there's so much more to talk about. But what was it that made you write The Couple Next Door? Have you read that? Do you know The Couple? It's just so good. It was so good. I was in awe of that book.
That's so funny, because that book was written as a pure experiment. That was the book. Okay, so I'd written 2 literary comedies, which were sold to a small Canadian press, and were never sold anywhere else. And then I wrote a 3rd one, and my agent couldn't sell it. So there's not a big market in Canada for what they call quiet literary comedies. So by this point, though, I'd learned about conflict. So I'd always wanted to write thrillers. That's what interests me. But I don't plan, so I know that plot, is so important to thrillers, and literary, it's not. So, I could write literary books and not really have much of a plot. Although I found that when they were finished, they did have a plot. So I thought, after my 3rd book that wasn't selling, I left the coffee shop, and my agent and I parted ways because I wasn't very happy that he wasn't going to try and sell it. And he said something like, "If only you could write a thriller." And I'd always wanted to write a thriller anyway. This would have been about a year before Couple Next Door came out, so 2015, something like that. So I went home and I thought, I'd love to write a thriller. I'll show him, right? But mostly I've been wanting to write one for a while, but I never thought I could do it. So I thought, I'll just do it as an experiment. It's a secret. I won't tell anyone. I won't tell my husband. I told my husband I'd start looking for a job because the literary thing wasn't really working out. And so I wrote it in about 4 or 5 months, and I just sat down and I just had the one idea. I lived in a semi-detached house, and I've had children, but they were a bit older by then. But I remembered what a nervous mother I was. And I thought about, what if you went next door for dinner and you left the baby at home and took the monitor with you? And I thought, would someone actually do that? And this is something I like. I like the gray areas, like with William hitting his daughter. I mean, he was hit as a child. She's extremely challenging. He's had a very bad day. Like, I never just make him a brute. He feels terrible about it. So I like the gray areas. So it's that question of, would you leave your kid at home and go, it's in the same house. It's just, next door. You'd think with the baby monitor, you'd be fine. But, moms generally have come out really strongly and decided, no way would I leave my kid at home.
I know somebody who did that.
Yeah, well, when I was a kid, you'd leave your kid in the pram outside the grocery store and go in for half an hour.
It's totally believable.
It's
totally believable.
It's totally believable someone would do that. So I had that idea, and that the baby would go missing, and that's all I had. So I started off with the dinner party there, and I know that they're at this dinner party, and I know that when they go home, the baby's going to be missing. And that's all I knew. But then after I wrote that first chapter, and the baby's missing, I reread it and I thought, well, here's the husband urging them to go out even after the babysitter has canceled. He's the one to suggest I found all these things were in there that led me forward.
It's interesting because you do a similar thing in Everyone Here Is Lying. It's an ensemble cast where we get the really small point of view of several characters, many characters, completely seamlessly done. And at the same time, we're getting the big picture of what really happened. So we have the small point of view and the huge point of view at the same time. And it's like we're getting all the puzzle pieces. And the idea that you don't know what the puzzle picture looks like is pretty interesting. Talk about writing an ensemble cast like that and the balance of the appearance of the characters and how seamlessly we feel that we're just sort of eavesdropping in people's minds. It's so seamless, Shari.
Well, I do a lot of editing. So I write my first draft in this rush of trying to figure out what's going on. And I think that's what gives it its pace too, is that I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going to happen next. I don't know what the next twist is going to be. So it's fun for me to write the first draft. I always love to write the first draft. And then I've got a story, I've got characters, I know what's happened, all the twists are there, but it's a bit of a mess. So then I have to go back and I have to restructure and just make it a better book, make sure everything lands where it should land. So it looks seamless, but there's a lot of work behind there.
No, I understand. Of course, because that's what makes it so good, is that how hard you work on something to make it seem so effortless, which everybody here who's a writer understands that. But I still think the idea of, so if you don't know, and I don't know either in my novels what happens, so when you get to the end and your brain sort of starts putting together this could be what it is. Where in the novel does that come for you?
I would say about 3/4 of the way through. What about with you?
Just exactly about there.
Yeah, about there. That's when I start to think about, how can I wrap this up?
or what might really...
And can I wrap it up?
Well, let me ask you about that. The can I wrap it up? I mean, my poor husband on the panel will have to talk about the days that I come out and say, this is never going to work. This is just never going to work. And he says, you always say that. And then I say...
That's what my husband says. He says, you always go through this. And I go, do I?
Tell me about
I can't, it's like childbirth. You don't remember it.
So you talk a little bit about that. You're such a mad success, and you have so many fans, and this book is so marvelous, and you can't fear that you can't do it again, because you always can, but.
Yeah, so every book is a new thing, and every book is a blank page, and you just have to trust the process. I always tell myself, well, I did it before, I can do it again. So one trick that I use when I feel overwhelmed is, instead of looking at what I have to do, I've got to finish off this book, I look at what I used to do or what I've already done. So I look at, I did 6 books and finished those off, so this will be no problem. Or, that's what I do.
Reassure yourself of success.
Yeah, instead of looking at your to-do list, you think of it as a ta-da list. Right? You go,
that is the best thing I ever heard.
I heard that somewhere and I thought, a ta-da list, that's fabulous. So don't look at what you have to do, although I always have a list of what I have to do. But think about what you've already done, and that makes you realize, oh yeah, I've done it before, it'll work out, it'll be fine. But there are some nights where you're lying in bed, you're thinking, have I put myself into a corner here?
Sometimes a corner is good, because getting out of it, when you get that moment of the realization of, you talk about it.
There's always a solution to every problem, don't you find? I find that, yeah. The only book I had a problem in that I thought I got myself into a bit of a mess was An Unwanted Guest, where it's a closed room mystery, and they're very hard to write, and I'll never do another one. But I started with the wrong death in the wrong order, and I just got myself backed into a corner. And then I thought, I have to change who dies first. And once I had the woman fall down the stairs and die first, everything worked out okay.
As it does.
As it does. But I mean, it was a few, it was hard.
Think about that from a writerly standpoint. You said this just so casually, when I realized that the wrong person died first, and I had to have the woman fall down the stairs first. That's a big writerly concept. That's statement from someone who understands the structure of a novel, the underlying structure of a novel. Talk a little bit about that understanding of story.
I think the hardest thing for me, and I think maybe, I'm not sure about other people, but for me for sure, structure is the hardest thing about writing. And whenever someone's starting to write a novel, they say, what should I do? And they get partway through and they abandon the novel. My advice is, if you really want to write novels, finish the damn novel. Because until you've finished it and gone over it as a structural whole, you won't learn anything. Until you've actually written the whole book and tried to rework it as a whole, you won't understand arc and how things have to fit. It's easy to write a scene. I mean, I know so many people in writing groups that can write a really great scene, but they cannot write a novel. And I think it's because they need to finish a novel and learn what a novel teaches you.
Because there is a rhythm and there is a music to it and there is pacing of it, and you're just the queen of pacing. It's just unbelievable. But I do think that if you don't know where you're going, everything is a possibility, and also that's terrifying.
I find that freeing, actually.
Okay, talk about it.
I find it more freeing to have everything open, because I tend to go off on tangents, and I like being free to go wherever it takes me. So I've gotten so that I'm quite comfortable going wherever I want to go.
So you just do it. I mean, if something occurs to you and someone says, I think I'll go to the store, and you think, really? Oh, okay, wonder why you're doing that. And then there turns out to be a reason.
Yeah, like I would know why they're going to the store, I think. I might want them to.
Why they want to, and that's about motivation.
Yeah, like I may think it's, this person needs to have a confrontation with that person. So I'll have her go to the store.
How
And
can
then
they
she'll
be
be
at the
there.
same place?
Yeah, because my whole writing path is really getting people into situations of conflict over and over again with different people and watching it just go crazy.
But then the conflict has to make sense, and they have to be in the same place at the same time. It's like a ship turning around back into port at the end, then, when everybody on the ship has to come to the same conclusion. Did you even know, like, the last frame of, like in a movie, the last picture that there would be in the novel?
For this one?
Yeah.
No, because I changed the ending on this one.
You changed the ending?
So I'll confess, partway through this book, I had more of an idea about what might happen than I generally do. But I changed the ending. I have changed endings in the past. You're dumbfounded.
No, I'm done. Just because I have my mouth open in awe. I'm surprised, not too surprised, but I'm mostly eager to see what the other ending is.
Okay, so I'm not going to tell you the ending, but the ending was the same, but the way that we came to the ending was different. I wrote 3 different ways that the resolution would come on this one.
Oh, that would be a masterclass if someday, years from now, when everybody's read the book and everybody knows it.
Except I don't know how I did it, and I don't remember those. Wait a minute, I have them somewhere.
Yeah, you have them.
I have them.
We want them.
Yeah.
I am very pleased with the way that the book ended. I have to say.
I'm pleased with that too.
More I will not say.
Yeah.
A couple more questions, and we'd love to take questions from the audience, so make sure you have some. You're a lawyer and an English teacher. I think they said you were a former lawyer and a former English teacher. Can you be former?
I'm a recovering lawyer, with apologies to other lawyers in the room. I wasn't a very good lawyer, and I hated being a lawyer. So I only did it for a year.
But didn't it, I'm now pushing, but didn't it sort of teach you about storytelling and that 2 sides to a story and the balance of power and conflict and guilt and that kind of stuff?
Not really. I mean, I was a baby lawyer doing commercial stuff. I wasn't really doing any, courtroom, coming up with a great story for the jury. I didn't do any of that. I think it helped with analytical skill, and I think it helped me. I said this to someone else. I think in law school and when you're a lawyer, they teach you to imagine everything bad that can happen. So if you're drawing up a partnership agreement or whatever, you always have to imagine what are all the terrible things that can go wrong. I'm really good at that. And I don't know if that's because I'm trained as a lawyer or because that's my own personal nature.
Well, you were talking earlier about being averse to conflict And then now you're talking about that you're not good at conflict, and now you're talking about trying to think of everything possible that could go wrong.
I'm a worrier.
Yeah, so you're a worrier. That's exactly what I was getting at. And worry and fear are just so pervasive, and everyone here is lying. Everyone is worried, and we feel for every single one of them. And their lives, no one's lives will ever be the same after this.
Yeah, I like everyone left changed afterwards. But yes, I'm a worrier and an awfulizer. I think about the worst thing that can happen and then it just gets worse. I mean, I don't lie awake at night worrying, but that's sort of my bent. I think about what can go wrong. And what was the question?
Well, I don't know.
I don't know.
But I do think we're talking about worrying, and we're talking about in storytelling and how people are changed at the end of the book. And you were saying that you love to have people changed at the end of the book. And every single character, and you will meet them all, and you will understand them all, and you will know them all, and you will care about them all. You'll understand why they do what they do. And on the flip side, you'll understand the person who's in conflict with them, a spouse or a child, when they realize the secrets that their parents or other have kept. That's life-changing too.
Yeah, I would say just about everybody has their life changed in this book, or even, in all my books, because they're pretty profound things that they find out. And yeah, I mean, that's life, right? If something really traumatic happens to you, it does change you, and it changes how you relate to others and to the world. But some people come out better. Like there's a couple, there's maybe two people that are there's maybe one person who's in a better place. Actually, you know what, maybe not even that. Even the detectives aren't very happy at the end of this one. Yeah.
I'm thinking, as you're going through this, I'm thinking there could be, no. That's great. There was a moment that in writing a novel when you just have to be finished. I mean, at that moment, and you hit send or whatever you do, and you have to be finished. And then you get back a book. You see, here's your gorgeous, gorgeous novel. What do you think of it? Are you happy with it? I love it. I cannot begin to tell you. And your fans, your readers will love it. But how do you feel about it?
It's funny. I always love it when it's my first draft. And then by the end of the editing process, I usually hate it because I'm sick of it. I don't want to look at it one more time. And then I have to look at it for line edits. Then I have to look at it for copy edits and proof. And I'm so sick of it. But, when I have a bit of distance, I like them again.
So why?
Well, because I think they're good books.
Yeah.
But I just, when you're doing a book a year and you're under intense time pressure and you're working long days on it, you do get sick of it. I do. Do you not get sick of your books?
From time to time, sure. And from time to time, I'm sick of it. From time to time, I think I can't do this. From time to time, I think I wrote these other books, but I'll never be able to do it again.
Yeah.
And then you get a good idea.
And then that gives you energy. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And that's what carries you.
Yeah.
It's interesting, when you think about, and then we'll take some questions. It's interesting when you think about, you had books that you loved. And then at some point there was that moment in the coffee shop when you just said, when he said no, or you said no, or everybody said no, and your life changed. Think about that now that you're the best-selling author in the entire universe or something like that. And that everywhere you go you have fans and people adore your books and cannot wait to buy them. What do you think about that?
Well, it's pretty fun when I see that agent now sometimes at things in Canada. He never wants to talk to me. Yeah. But actually he's moved to New York, so I don't see him anymore. But it feels really good, and it feels like it's worth taking a gamble on something that you love to do, that you want to do. So I spent years, I knew I wanted to be a writer when I was a kid, and I spent years taking detours and doing things. I didn't really want to go to law school. I just went to law school, and I had a degree in political science and economics. That's what you do. That's what you did back then. If you had good marks, you went to law school. And I never really thought about it. I didn't, And then I became an English teacher because I really just love books and reading and writing. And then, I ended up not doing that for very long because I had children and I stayed home. And that's when I started writing. But by then I was in my late 30s. So I think if you really want to do something, it's worth doing and not waiting as long as I did. But sometimes you just have to be ready, And writing takes a long time. Like, people think I'm an overnight success, but I've been writing for, well, my oldest is now 24, so I've been writing for 24 years.
I mean, I do think.
And I've only been successful for 7. So
far.
there.
So far. I do think things happen when the time comes. And you wouldn't have been able to write the books, your thrillers, without being who you were at the time, without having that.
Yeah, and I think I learned to write when I wrote those other books, the 2 that were published and the one after that that wasn't published. I had very good editors, and I learned about conflict, and that's where I learned to write, and I learned how to struggle with structure. And if you've written 3 books to completion that are, critically acclaimed, even if they don't sell, then you know how to write. So when I went to write a thriller, I knew how to write, I just didn't know how to write a thriller. And it turns out, and I didn't know any crime writers. And now I do, and now I know that there are lots of crime writers, you included, Lisa Jewell and lots of other people, that don't plan anything. And they have great plots and lots of, turning points and twists and stuff. So if I'd spoken to someone about that earlier, I might have given it a go younger.
You wouldn't be who you were.
But I wouldn't have been who I was, I wouldn't have had that fear of a child going missing. So that's what I tapped into for that one. And now I just tap into all my fears. You see, a lot of my books are about people with their teenage children and
Yes,
and,
indeed.
and
what they might be doing,
and
what they might be thinking, and what they might be hiding.
because you have no control, right? And it's funny because I wrote Couple Next Door would have been when my kids were teenagers, but I could remember when they were infants. And now my kids are older, but I'm thinking, oh, teenage years. You get a bit of distance.
Well,
you think,
anybody who's a parent or a child will relate to this book. Let me just put it that way. And that's just about everybody, right? You're on book tour now.
Yeah.
Is it exciting?
Yeah, no, it's really fun. I haven't been in the States for, years, since before the pandemic. And I just went back to England for the first time in 4 years too. So yeah, this is sort of my first foray back because I didn't have a book last year. Yeah, so it's nice. I'm really enjoying it.
Congratulations. This is an
Thank you.
amazing
Thank
novel.
you.
Who has a question for Shari?
Yes. So there's lots of terrible things that happen in domestic thrillers. I'm wondering, is there one subject that you won't touch? Is there something that you definitely will not, like some territory you will not stray into?
We should repeat the question.
Yeah, I mean, is there any, lots of terrible things happen in my books, is there anything I won't write about? And yeah, I have my own limits. For instance, I wouldn't put in about a brother physically molesting his sister with her friends, even though it's a true case. Things like that I won't do. I stay away from really icky things.
I think this is a sort of the DNA of the Shari Lapena novel, is that they're dark and twisty and incredibly surprising, but they're not disturbing.
They're not
Graphic.
They're not graphic. It's about the psychological suspense. It's the fear in the head rather than the actual physical violence. There's not generally much physical violence in my books. It's
And
more
it's just
the anticipation
Yes,
and fear,
exactly.
and people's imaginations running away with them.
And the way that we can convince ourselves, all of us, and the people in the book as well, the way that we can convince ourselves that something is true or not true or must have happened or might have happened or what if that did happen, and then suddenly it becomes true and becomes real, and you act on that.
Yeah. And people make really poor decisions under stress.
But in this book, you're such a genius at motivation because we understand why people do what they do. I mean, we may think, oh, don't go, but you understand exactly why they do it, and that's really brilliant. Who else has a question?
Hi, Ms. Lapena. I have a question in regards to the themes of your book. I noticed that it seems like there's a lot of themes of trauma, existentialism, and fear. So what inspired you to write the book and say, okay, this is what I'm going to tackle?
I never think about theme until the book is done. And I don't remember where I heard this, but theme is something that is expressed in your book without you even really realizing, I think. You write the book and then you realize what it's about. You write the story and then you see, do you agree? You find out what the story is really saying.
I remember when I sent one of my books into my editor, and she wrote back, "I love this book about redemption." I'm like, "Yeah, redemption." That is totally what it's about. But I'll tell you that the historian David McCullough was interviewed once, and he was asked exactly the question that you're asking. How do you have, Mr. McCullough? Do you have a theme for every book that you write? And he answered what you answered. It was, "Yes, I do, and I write the book to find out what it is." Yeah.
That's exactly right. I think if you're writing, I mean, you can, I guess, approach a book and want to deal with certain issues in it. But yeah, theme is something that comes out from the story.
And from the people's actions
Yeah.
to each other and what we can learn from that.
Yeah.
It's really exciting though, isn't it, when it
Yeah.
emerges?
Yeah.
Take a couple more questions. Yes.
Have you ever considered like a movie adaptation for any of your novels?
That's not really how it works. It's like, you don't think, oh, I'd like to make this new movie. We all have agents, and we all option our books for film and TV, and we wait. We just wait until something happens. This is optioned. It's looking fairly promising right now, but I've said that before. I haven't had anything made yet.
But it's so cinematic. It is so cinematic.
But even on a practical level, I think my books would be fairly cheap to film, because they're all pretty much, discussions in houses. And you would just one set in Scarborough, or Nova Scotia, it would be cheap.
I mean, it is interesting because when you put it that way, it's mostly just discussions in houses. But
Sounds
isn't
boring.
that real life?
Yeah.
That is what real life is, and it's just what the topic of the discussion is that's very, very disturbing. I'd love to see that. Yes.
So I actually finished this book right before I got here. Really good, 5 out of 5 for me. I was wondering why 9 years old?
I like 9 because that's sort of the first time I can remember. I remember being sort of sentient at 9. 9 is when I thought I want to be a writer and I want to write Nancy Drew books. I have some memories of being 6 and stuff, but not much. But I can remember 9. Yeah, and I think for a lot of people that's an age where you start to. Am I
A
wrong?
9-year-old is smart.
9-year-olds
have motivation, they have
Yeah,
desire, they have intent.
They're on the cusp, and this one is very bright, but she's only 9, so she doesn't understand everything that's going on
I
around her.
felt a lot of her attitude being more of a teenager one, so I didn't know if you were going with today's generation, which is hand in hand with that, or if you just want to make it a little bit creepier than usual.
I think I did a lot of research on children with different challenges. This one's quite oppositional. And I hope I got her right. I think I did. I was doing an event last night in Pittsburgh, and a woman who had finished reading it, she comes up to me afterwards. She goes, "I'm a psychiatric nurse in a peds ward. Not anymore, but I used to be." And she goes, because someone had said something about, "Are kids like that really real?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So she goes, "We had lots of those. She goes, "We had people, they're scary, especially the girls, these little psychopaths, and they're really smart." Now, I'm not saying that Avery's a psychopath, but, just the idea of a difficult, challenging child, and, would a child be that manipulative? And yeah.
A child be that manipulative.
Come on! Children are very
And they
manipulative.
know what they want, and exactly as you say, not only Avery, but every child in the book has an agenda.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Because every human being, every human being has an agenda, but they all have, they're all worried. Yeah.
They have, yes, exactly, desires.
Yeah.
And things they want.
Yeah.
And a child wants things in a very passionate and open
Yes,
kind of
children,
way.
and a 9-year-old who's very bright and manipulative is a serious concern. They can get themselves into all sorts of trouble they're not ready for because they're only 9. And they think they know way more than they do because they're really bright, but they don't have that world experience. So I think kids today, going off on kids today, because of social media, I think they're not mature in that they're worldly. They're worldly in that they've seen too much on the internet for their age, but they're not mature. Do you know what I'm saying? They think they're more mature than they are because they know all about stuff that they wouldn't have known when they were 14, but now they know it when they're 10.
And that is the essence of your book, is there is a facade to everyone. Everyone is pretending to know something or be a certain way, whether you're 9 or whether you're 40. Everyone wants people to think they are who they want them to be, and they're not. Not one person in this book. So don't focus on Avery, because her parents and her friends and everyone around her has the same situation.
Yeah, but it's easy for a 9-year-old to get herself into trouble because she thinks she knows more than she does and doesn't really understand the world as much as she thinks she does.
One last question? Yes. So you've mentioned that your books are set in the States, but yet you're living in Canada.
Yeah.
Why did you make that decision to have them set in the States?
It was the decision of my publisher. I have an American publisher,
Okay.
and they said they would prefer it. And I said, I don't have a problem with that.
Is there a lot different? I mean, do you have to?
No,
It's
it's
like
not that
calling it a car park or a parking lot, things like
It's-
that.
Yeah, there's a few little things, like we say grade 7 and you say 7th grade. But honestly, I live in Ontario, and right across the lake is upstate New York, and I said everything in upstate New York, and the geography is the same. I mean, there are different political landscapes, but I don't go into those. So yeah, it's
It's interesting, when I was thinking about Stanhope, I had a moment of thinking, where is that? It doesn't really matter where it is. It just
It's a
feels
fictional
like
town.
yeah, but theoretically, it doesn't really matter. It's a neighborhood that's very, very relatable. That's
familiar.
Very
Like
familiar.
you've all
exactly.
seen that kind of a neighborhood. And to make up my names, I often will take a name from Nova Scotia, because that's where my family's from, and a lot of the names that are in upstate New York sound like Nova Scotia names, but they're not, so I just play with them a little bit. So
Do people in your books start with a name and then they keep that name? Do you ever change people's names?
no, I'm horrible with names. I change them all the
You change
time.
them all
All
the
the time. Because I never get a good name. And I also, like if I start one character starting with the letter M, I'll have like 5 of them starting with the letter M. Why do we all do that? And then the editors go, you can't have 5 characters starting with the letter M. And
You think, why don't you notice it when you're writing it? Later I think, wait, I had Jane and I had Mrs. Jane. Why?
We all do it. I've asked other writers. We all do it. And so names are really hard for me, because you have to. I've gotten around it now because I Google, what a character of this age would have been born in such a year in such a state. These are the popular names. These are the not as popular names, but believable names. So that's what I do. And then I get the last name, and then I Google the name, because I've run into trouble 2 times with people saying, oh, I happen to be Detective Rasbach. Did I ever tell you? I haven't told you this story. So in my first book, The Couple Next Door, there's a detective called Detective Rasbach. And one day my publisher gets a letter going, I'm Detective Rasbach, and I want to know if Shari Lapena based The Couple Next Door on me. And I'm like, and he goes, and I'm from Toronto, and I understand the writer's from Toronto, and I do child kidnapping cases. And I'm like, oh, God. How did that happen?
I mean, that's just random.
No, I'll tell you how it happened. I practiced law with his sister, Celia Rasbach. And I didn't even know she had a brother, and I didn't know that he was a detective and he worked on child missing cases. I just thought that was a really cool name. Anyway, he was fine, but the really scary one was, if anyone has read A Stranger in the House, there's a woman in there called Bridget Cruikshank. So when that book came out and did well, I got an email from Bridget Cruikshank saying, my friends all say that my name is in your book. And I'm like, oh God. So now I Google them and I make sure that person doesn't exist.
They do now in your books, though. They do now. And I do think that Detective Rasbach does sound like a perfect name for a detective. So
perfect,
there you
isn't
go.
it?
And you can't change that.
No, I can't change that.
Shari, you're amazing. Welcome
Thank
to
you,
Brookline.
Hank.
Welcome to Boston. I'm your hugest fan and have been just forever. So it's a joy to talk with you. And thank you all for coming, Shari. Thank you for giving all of us so much joy and entertainment. And as I said, clear your calendars, because you will not be able to put this in.
Thank you, Hank. Thanks so much.